This is For the Governed, a podcast series brought to you by Athalonz. Here are your hosts, Tim Markison and Ron Cates.
Welcome to the Athalonz podcast. I'm Ron Cates. Joining me today is Tim Markison, the CEO and founder of Athalonz. Now, Tim, we've talked about this in podcasts before and on the blog before. Unfortunately, you were sexually abused as a child.
Yep.
Because of that, you've gone to therapy and group therapy where you learned a lot about emotion and a lot about gender.
Right.
Elaborate, please.
Yeah, so when I started dealing with my issues about 30 years ago, so this is the late 80s, early 90s, part of my treatment was going to group therapy sessions. And almost every group I was in dealing with, the trauma of being sexually assaulted as a child was me and a bunch of women. And,
So the statistics aren't really that different, but it seems like men are more likely to repress or not talk about it, not go to therapy. Am I correct?
Right. So as I understand the statistics, so when I started this, 1 in 4 girls would be sexually assaulted in their childhood and 1 in 6 boys. The last I looked was within the last few months. That data is substantially the same as it is the same today as it was 30 plus years ago. So, as a society, we're really not making any progress with respect to reducing incident of child abuse. And considering the population is growing, we actually have, more and more children being subject to sexual abuse.
So for a variety of reasons, you are often the only male among a bunch of women.
Right.
And you learn things because of that.
Right. So, I was raised, I had a lot of issues with the way I was raised, but one of the things was what a man was supposed to be about. We were supposed to be strong and emotionless, never cry, self-reliant, never needing help from anybody or even asking for help. All those typical, male things. And, and society reinforce that through television and movies and so many social conventions. And there's shifting now, at least in the workplace, but 30 years ago the workplace was very much stereotypical male. So I had assumed that it was just a gender trait of, well, men are stoic and men and women have different emotions. But through the therapy sessions with, again, mainly women, I realized that, I had the exact same emotions that they had and the same struggles that women had. And it made me really realize that it really is social convention that dictates how men can deal with things and how women can deal with things. And not to mitigate what women go through, because they are subject to more abuse than men, and it's painful, but they are expressing emotions, talking about feelings. It's more socially acceptable for women to do that than for a man.
So you talk about 6 basic emotions.
Right.
The first one's fear.
Men and women all share, and yet from a male standpoint, we're not supposed to be afraid of anything. I always go to, we're all supposed to be like John Wayne in the movies, never afraid of a fight, never back down from anything, always willing to speak his mind. And, if somebody needs to be punched in the face, you punch him in the face.
Yeah, and we're certainly taught not to fear being discarded or left behind, those sort of things that, of course, everyone has those fears.
Right. And it's just, how we're allowed to express them. So, the more we, I'll speak personally, from my perspective and my experiences, the more I suppressed the feelings. And in my situation, I had to. I couldn't express feelings when I was being abused. My defense mechanisms were to shut all that down. But I turned all that inward. So all the fear was turned inward. So I was afraid of everything, afraid of authority figures, afraid of, everything. And then with respect to anger,
I was going to say the next one that's huge has
Yeah.
to be anger.
Yeah.
How could you not be incredibly angry about what was happening to you, but you can't express it? So what does that lead to?
For me, when I was, I learned this fairly young, but when I would express anger, the amount of anger that came back at me was many times over what I was expressing or capable of. So I learned very quickly to turn the anger inward. So so you couple that with the fear, and then the anger, all focused inward. It really enforced the messaging that my father was trying to instill on me, that I was, worthless and stupid, ugly, couldn't do anything right, those messages really stuck, and then it created self-hate, and that's where in the group therapy, all of the victims of child sexual abuse that I've encountered over the last 30 years, that's one thing we all have in common, is there's varying levels of self-hate that somehow, when we get perpetrated upon as children, the anger and frustration and fear all somehow gets directed back at the child, and we take that on, and we hate ourselves for it to varying degrees.
When there's no healthy way, you're not allowed to express your anger in any normal or healthy or typical way. So self-loathing is where the anger goes. Yes.
Right. And that creates other issues as well. You try to find other ways to mitigate that pain. And we've talked about this before too. But for me, I was, I guess, fortunate that in when I was abused, sometimes I was giving drugs or alcohol to make me more compliant. So that little bit of a buzz feeling that comes from alcohol, that freaks me out. So I never actually wanted to drink to try to mask any of my feelings. But also that further accentuated the self-hate and self-loathing towards myself, because I didn't have that outlet. So I turned to other things.
What about disgust? You mentioned disgust.
Yeah, so that's another one of the primary or basic emotions that we have, and it really, I think, has to deal with, for me, being embarrassed, ashamed, or having a need to feel superior to somebody else. But I turned all that inward towards myself as well. And
you could rightfully be disgusted by the actions of these perpetrators,
right?
But that becomes internalized somehow.
Yeah, and I don't know how it was spun for me. I know I was threatened if I told, I would be harmed, and I have the sense that I was told that this was my fault. If I were just better, this wouldn't be happening. So to a kid, you take that on. So so that disgust was turned inward. So was disgusted with.
You
with
feel
myself.
shame.
Yeah. And again, through the groups, women would say almost the exact same thing, and that really kind of helped me to open up and express what I was feeling with that kind of stuff. Yeah.
The next one on your list, Tim, is sadness.
Yeah.
I can see that being a natural outcome.
Yeah. When as a child, and it doesn't even have to be as a child, as any time in a person's life, I'll keep it personal to me. If I don't feel loved, don't feel worthy, it's saddening, and times that can be so overwhelming that question wanting to continue on with life. So but there's where we start to really see a gap between what's socially acceptable for men and socially acceptable for women. Women are it's much more socially acceptable for women to express the sadness, to shed a tear, to really feel that pain, where for a man, it's deemed as a weakness from a stereotypical standpoint. So we, as in general, men kind of back off from sadness and just stay stuck in anger. So the sadness is kind of underlying the anger. But as men, we we stay stuck in anger because we're socially acceptable to express anger, but not sadness, because that's viewed as a weakness.
On to some better ones.
Yep.
We all feel happiness at times.
Yep. And that's an interesting one, because that's one I personally struggle with, is actually feeling happy, feeling joyful about things that are going on. And I've gotten a lot better over the years. And I think, I think all the victims that I've talked to, and when we get into a more deep discussion, they all kind of struggle with that, men and women. It's hard to feel happy on a consistent basis. And happy, there's so many permutations of that. So it's really kind of joyful, content, just feeling optimistic, feeling good about who you are, where you are in life, the situation that you're in. And that's really, really hard to accomplish when a person is, for me, being filled with, fear and self-loathing, self-hate, internalizing all that anger. It's a real challenge to get to there.
Tim, what about surprise? Mm-hmm. That's an emotion.
Yeah. For me, that was always met with something that was bad. Surprise should be like happy birthday, surprise birthday parties and things like that are more.
I got you this
joyful.
gift you didn't expect.
Yeah. I was always kind of more on the negative side, so I don't like surprises because that leads to fear and some of the other things. But I think even there's social conventions that, men are supposed to stay more stoic with those kind of emotions as well.
Well, some of these we have a negative connotation attached to them, and some not so much.
Right.
And it seems odd, the ones that we attach negative connotations to versus ones we attach positive ones to. It's okay to get angry. It's okay to be to be disgusted.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. So as I've given this a lot of thought and addressed it in the blog here, but as that stereotypical man, you're allowed to be angry, you're allowed to be disgusted with situations and others, and express those emotions. But like sadness and fear and those type of feelings, or to shed a tear, that's deemed a weakness. And then there's also the connotation that, well, if I am sad, if I am expressing emotion, if I am talking about my feelings, that's deemed to be a weakness, and it clouds a person's judgment. That's a perception. So that if you're emotional, you can't think right. Well, I think that's actually kind of backwards. I think and this is just kind of anecdotal evidence, but I was thinking about this the other day. You think about anger and disgust. Anger, there's crimes of passion. I got so mad, I just, and then, disgust, a need to feel, superiority over somebody else. So that kind of leads to hate crimes. So you think about the number of crimes that are committed out of anger, out of disgust. And, there's all kinds of special categories to deal with all those, to kind of figure out the mental state of the person that when they committed these crimes.
Yeah, there's not too many crimes committed because of happiness.
Right. Or even sadness, or expressing emotions over empathy or compassion. So, I think, we've got it backwards, that it's anger and disgust that really cloud a person's judgment and forces them into bad actions or inappropriate actions, where, sadness and other things that cause emotion, where, somebody may shed a tear, choke up while they're trying to express something. I don't think that clouds the judgment near as much. And so these are the start of things that we're talking about, and we'll continue to talk about, to start to make a shift in the perception of really what it means to be a man.
Your experiences as a child have created this guy who's truly passionate about ending abuse of children.
Right.
What are some of the practical ways that's going to happen?
So, I've given this a a good bit of thought too, because there's legislation out there, but that the legal process is just not going to work for several reasons. The fear of actually getting jail time, it's not a deterrent. And then the way the legal process works is, the defendant is innocent until proven guilty, and then it's an adult's word versus a child's word, and then part of the defense strategy is to discredit the witness, so the child.
That all takes place after the bad things have happened, too.
Yeah.
So how do we prevent it?
Yeah. So
how do you stop an abuser from becoming an abuser?
Yeah. So to me, that's the only way we're going to make as a society headway. Is abusers have to stop abusing, and we have to prevent potential abusers from becoming abusers. And the data suggests that a majority of perpetrators today were themselves victims of child abuse. And the data also suggests that a majority of perpetrators are men. And the only way I know to heal from those wounds where somebody doesn't want to act out against others to try to mask their own feelings is to feel the feelings, which is going to include a fair bit of crying, because there's a good bit of pain associated with being traumatized as a child. Talking about the feelings and seeking help from others. All things that the stereotypical man isn't supposed to do. So until we can break down that stereotypical man of stoic, I don't talk about my feelings, I don't cry, I don't need help from anyone, the cycle of abuse is going to continue. So that's really a big part of the messaging I'm going to be carrying forward is we need it to be okay for men to talk about their feelings, to feel their feelings, to cry, to seek the help of others, whether it's professional help or groups, so that they can feel better about themselves, so the need to perpetrate on others goes away. And then we can actually start to see some significant reduction in child abuse.